You are listening to the Roberta Glass True Crime Report, putting the true back in true crime. From New York City, Roberta Glass is now on the record.
Okay, we're trying it again. Can everyone hear me? I hope this is working. Just had some technical difficulties having this streaming program recognize my microphone, so I'm back again. And thank you, Tommy DV. It's good to be back. So, I wanted to talk about Fiona Apple. Does everybody remember Fiona Apple? Now, I'm a big fan of Fiona Apple. She became famous in the 90s as a really, I would think she was at the 1920s, really young. She became famous. My understanding, she was a musical prodigy. She also dated Paul Thomas Anderson, the director of There Will Be Blood, Boogie Nights, and many other classic movies. And I did not know that she was a court watcher, but what does that mean to be a court watcher? So does she go to court? What does she do? And it is a program made up some of people who've been in prison that go into courts and watch court proceedings looking for injustice. And of course, I always encourage everyone to go into our justice system and watch a trial, watch a hearing, check it out for yourself. But if you go in with my criticism really is if you go with an attitude that with a fixed opinion that the system is unjust, looking for injustice, you will see it everywhere in everything. And so I won't go through all of the things that I previously went through, but I'm going to start with an interview with the Court Watch MP founder and Fiona Apple talking about what Court Watch does, and it explains a little bit more about it. So we'll get into that. And for the very patient people watching this interview for the second time, thank you. This woman's name is Carmen Johnson, and she's the director. And Fiona Apple is, of course, the famous rock star. And you see this with a lot of charities. They really glom on, and so do cults by chance. They really glom on to celebrities because once you have a celebrity, even, I don't know, Fiona Apple's music now is very critically acclaimed, but she's no Beyonce, that's for sure, as far as star power. But even if you have a name that people recognize and trust, it gives legitimacy to your organization. So Fiona Apple has become the voice and face of the court watch. And this is not the only court watching program. There's one in New York, all over the country. This is the one that's centered in Maryland, around Washington, D.C. area. And this is from the Washington Post.
There should be court watching in every city and county across the nation.
Court watching feels like taking care of each other.
This could happen to any of us, any of you.
All of us need to be participants.
So there's Fiona saying it feels like taking care of each other. But I'm curious, who's taking care of the victims? The other side, right? Not the accused. But you'll see that that's a theme over and over again, this kind of real identification with the accused and the convicted, and a real vilification of law enforcement, the system, judges, and prosecutors.
Participating.
Justice is possible when we hold power accountable.
My name is Fiona Apple, and although I do not reside in Maryland, I have been a court watcher for Prince George's County for 2 years now. I'm watching a bail hearing. Within 2 days of someone's arrest, they are brought before a judge like this one, who will decide whether they'll be released or incarcerated in jail while their case proceeds.
So the cartoon bubble there, for those who are listening on the podcast, says the prosecutor says he's a danger to the community, and the public defender says he's innocent and he's a father. So he can't be right. Right. There's lacking a little nuance. He can't be both, but okay. He has to be innocent. He can't be a father and guilty, right? or or a menace to the community and innocent, right?
Decisions can mean life or death, and they are made within minutes with little information. All over the country, thousands of people go through these hearings each day, as if in a national assembly line of injustice. But in a growing number of places, people are beginning to hold actors accountable by showing up in court and documenting what they see. We are here, and we are watching.
So you caught the audio there. We are here and we are watching. We are here and we are moral, watching this immoral thing, right? Keeping an eye on this assembly line of injustice.
Hello and welcome to Washington Post Live. I'm Katie Metler, a criminal justice reporter here at the Post, and today I'm joined by Carmen Johnson, director of Court Watch PG, that stands for Prince George's County in Maryland, and one of her Court Watch volunteers, Fiona Apple, the Grammy Award-winning musician. Carmen, Fiona, welcome to Washington Post Live.
Pleased to have. Thank you.
It's so good to see you both. I've been writing about you and your friendship for 2 years now, and I'm just really excited to share your story with our broader Washington Post Live audience today. Carmen.
So for those that don't know, the Washington Post, this is perceived as a more left-leaning lefty publication, and clearly this journalist is not a neutral journalist. She's not going to ask the critical questions. She's just going to give a softball interview. If by evidence, I'm so excited. I've been writing about your friendship for 2 years. So obviously she feels very positively about the program and about these two. So that'll just give you a little insight into the direction that this is going.
Let's start with you and let's go back to the beginning. Court Watch PG was launched in 2019. How did you first get involved?
Yeah, Court Watch was launched by our executive director of Life After Release, Ms. Kiana Johnson. And so she tried to get me involved back in 2019, but I was not ready mentally. I had just came home myself from a sabbatical with the injustice system. And so then she,
not that she was convicted of a crime and did her time. She had a sabbatical because she's also, see, it's interesting here. Sometimes she goes by Dr. Carmen Johnson, but I couldn't find any information about where she got her PhD online. And that doctor comes and goes from her name depending on what interview she's doing, where she's showing up. But so that'll give you an idea. And if you go to the Court Watch website, it's filled with language like that.
She, kept plaguing me. And then finally I agreed. So I came on February 4th, 2020 as a court watcher. And I learned everything that I needed to learn from her. And then once she realized that I was a fast learner, she gave me the full autonomy to grow Court Watch to what it is today. So I owe all of that to Ms. Kiana Johnson.
And Fiona.
And we'll be covering Kiana Johnson's background little bit later. That's very interesting too.
When did you first hear about Court Watch, and why were you drawn to becoming a volunteer?
Well, as my dog starts making noise in the background, I got into Court Watch because I had participated in the campaign called Gasping for Justice, which was when we were able to read declarations from people who were being caged inside of Prince George's County Jail during the pandemic. And it was
So these people are very familiar with how important language is. And so people were being held, they weren't doing their time for their crimes. They they were they they were being caged like animals, and so they're very aware, and they pick their language. They're very aware of the language they're using, and they pick it carefully.
to let people know how horrible the conditions were there. And after I read that declaration, I couldn't get it out of my mind.
That's something that always bewildered me about this movement. Really I really would consider this another wing of the wrongful conviction movement, and in my opinion, another wing of innocence fraud, because they're pushing an ideology that really is the gas to this movement. And the ideology is that our criminal justice system is systematically racist, systematically unfair. And of course, it's unfair because it's made by humans. Life is unfair. Of course, rich people have advantages, but was it systematic? I think it was built the best way it can be built. Obviously, mistakes happen because people are fallible, not because the system is fundamentally, systematically. That's what I would argue. But that is not the ideology that is taught in our higher education. You're not taught that. And you're not, this will go on. And also it will go on to be really very anti-police officer, anti-cop rhetoric is coming. So watch out for that.
And then I guess because I participated in that, I got on some lists, and I got an email from Court Watch PG saying they wanted volunteers. And, immediately it made sense. Even before I really understood what it entailed, it made sense that, like, yeah, when people are having their worst day, at their most vulnerable, at the very least, somebody, be there with them, be a witness. Don't let them go through it alone, and take a look at what's going on, because we don't know what's going on inside there. They keep it all secret.
So, I find that very endearing and engaging. Of course, nobody wants to see anyone tripped up in our criminal justice system, especially anyone innocent. However, when someone is dangerous, and it's really interesting that they're going to bail hearings after we've had so much bail reform in New York and Los Angeles and other cities, where they're really just not holding anyone. They're saying, well, it's unfair to the poor because the poor can't pay bail. So we're just going to basically let most people go on nothing. And it's really hurt women, where their victimizers come right back out immediately. There's just no cool down time at all. They're just coming right back out and re-victimizing their victims. So just no thought. So I have no problem with having someone there to witness their bail hearing, watch their bail hearing, even a stranger. However, I wish these same kind of organizations were there for victims at the same level, right? There might be a few victims organizations, but not nearly as well funded and as many as these kind of organizations. I mean, this is a multi-billion-dollar movement, the wrongful conviction movement.
So I just thought that it made sense, and I signed up, and then met Carmen and stuck around.
Now we're here. One of my favorite elements of Court Watch PG is how it brought the two of you together in friendship. And Carmen, I'm wondering if you can talk about that first day. I know you do trainings, you've done hundreds of trainings now, but talk about that first day when Fiona quietly popped up on the Zoom to be trained with you.
So, well, first of all, she did not, her email does not say Fiona Apple. So that's the first thing. And so when she came on the screen, because I was a fan of hers, back in the 90s, and I used to play her music over and over again. So when she popped up, I looked. And so I politely got up from my chair and I went over into my living room, and then I Googled her. I'm like, that can't be her. And I Googled her, and then I screamed in my hand like a little 15-year-old high school kid. And then I came back, fixed my clothes, came back and sat down, and I said, hello, Miss Apple. And she said, hello, Dr. Johnson. And then this big old smile just came over both of our faces. It was just like magic. It was like,
Wouldn't it be funny if Fiona Apple started a trend with rock stars court watching? So the next Zoom, like Bruce Springsteen is in the Zoom chat. Yeah, I want to watch our assembly line of injustice.
I met my lost sister, you know what I mean? And that's how it began.
Fiona, I'm curious from your perspective. Oh, I'm sorry, Carmen.
She's been with us ever since.
Fiona, from your perspective, maybe share a little bit from that day, and also how your friendship with Carmen that began when you hopped on that Zoom has really fueled your drive, over the last 2 years to be a court watcher.
Yeah, well, from my perspective, I was I was just embarrassed. I was not expecting to be recognized at all in that setting, and so of course my first thought was like, when she said she had to go and Google me, I'm like, yeah, of course she did, because I looked like hell and I probably didn't look like anything. Anyway, but she I did that that orientation with Carmen and Edwan, and I loved it. It all made sense. And then the thing about Carmen. I love you, Carmen. I love you so much. She's just such a great leader. She does something that I haven't seen a lot of people do in this world, which is that she's just completely honest about what's going on with her. And she has this amazing ability, this balance with all the people that she's leading in Court Watch, that she's our leader and we look up to her and we respect her. But we also we want to take care of her. She's our sister too. We're like family. It's like that because she shows her vulnerabilities, and she shares how being incarcerated and how having that BS done to her has affected her to this day. And we all know how hard it is for her to go.
So it wasn't that she was rightfully convicted. And I'll leave that a cliffhanger of what she was convicted of to the end of this video. I'll get into it, but it's not like that. It was done to her. The system did it to her. She did nothing. She was perfect. She's our sister. I mean, I can understand, you like the people you like, but let's get into reality here. The reality is as much as Carmen Johnson wants to go around telling everyone the system sought her out and victimized her, I would say she was the victimizer. And so would the federal government.
Go through all this stuff because it's so triggering. And I mean, she just wrote a book. She just wrote a great book, and she had to go through every bit of that memory, and that's just that's so traumatizing. But she did it so she could share her story with everybody, and she does this work that is so hard for her.
She definitely didn't do it to play the victim, right?
Because she wants to help other people not have to go through what she went through. So it's just like Carmen is really like the heart for me, of this whole experience, because she is my loved one. I see what she goes through and it makes me furious. She's such a wonderful person, and she's just so caring and so giving, and she's my sister, and she cracks me up too. And she's a great boss and a great friend and great sister.
Now everyone else understands why your friendship is part of my favorite part of Court Watch PG. Carmen, in 2020, the pandemic upended the legal system and forced courts to go completely virtual. Explain the impact that the pandemic had on your work and your Court Watch team.
Well, the first thing I thought was, at that time, it was no big deal to have anywhere between 60 to 75 cases in one day. And I was thinking, oh my God, these these loved ones are going to be behind the wall all of this time. Like, what are we going to do? And everybody was trying to figure out, the judges was trying to figure out, the defense attorneys was trying to figure out, the state's attorney, everybody was trying to figure out what to do. And then all of a sudden, mysteriously, we get this Zoom, me or Kiana got this Zoom link, and we're like, what is this? And it was Zoom access to get into the courtrooms. And it changed our life, because then we realized how important virtual access is, opposed to actually going into the courtrooms. So it changed our lives. And, we have a lot of court watchers that have disabilities and they're unable to hear. And so now they can see the mouths of the defense, the mouths of the assistant state's attorney. Of course, they can see the judges. They can they can read lips and see what's going on, which makes it very, very important. Not to mention, loved ones are now able to, to not have to take off work, but go to their car or go into a private room and be able to support their loved one that's standing before the judge to get out. So, Zoom, a platform like Zoom Access absolutely changed the whole thing based on COVID. COVID was a gift in that way.
I just want a point of clarity. You and Fiona both keep using the phrase loved one as you talk about the people who are going through the court system. I'm wondering, Carmen, if you can explain why you all use that phrase, loved one, instead of something like defendant.
Because defendant is a negative term. And so, they are human beings that are dealing with this system. Whether they're guilty or innocent, they're still human beings. And so as far as we're concerned, defendant is negative. That is a very negative word. All organizations out there that represent reentry and all kinds of stuff like that, you need to stop using the word defendant, because that's a horrible word, an ugly word. They are loved ones. They are people. They are men, women, youth that are caught up in this ugly web of the injustice system.
Thank you.
So they didn't do anything. They just got caught up somehow. They were walking down the street innocently, and they got caught up somehow in the system. And I'm not denying that that wrongful convictions do happen, and wrongful accusations certainly, but that is not the majority. And what's the language for their victims? What's the language for the people that they steal from? What's the language for the people that they brutalize? What do you call their victims? So it's like one big criminal family. We're in this criminal family, and we have to understand all the defendants' weaknesses, past life history, trauma, and forgive their behavior. And not only forgive it, deny it, and say that the real problem is the system, the judges, the prosecutors, the cops. It's nothing they did. And if they did it, it was just a mistake. They didn't do it intentionally. And just something about COVID and the prisons, this movement I've never seen a movement to make the prisons better. And I've wondered to myself, if they want the prisons system, they want it to be bad. They want it to be poorly run and difficult to get through for the prisoners, because when they get out, they like to say it's horrible, so they can try to pass laws like nobody does any more than 20 years, no matter what the crime. That's the end goal. Get rid of the death penalty, get rid of life without parole for everyone, every crime, and make the maximum sentence for even the most heinous crimes 20 years. That's where this is going. So you think, oh, there's nothing wrong. I mean, if they want to call them loved ones, let them call them loved ones. It's sort of communistic in some ways, and comrade. But let them. But really what it is, it's more propaganda to sell you on this idea of that our justice system is by its design unfair.
For that. Fiona, you have been helping to fight for a bill in Maryland that would cement online access to courtrooms into law. Why is this so important for you?
People need to see what's going on. It's our right to see what's going on. It's kind of ridiculous that we have to work so hard to get this legislation because it's our right. It's available. It's the right thing to do. There's other places that do it. And, you know, this is you can't fix things if you don't know what's going on. And it's like, you know, how you were just talking with Carmen about how we call them loved ones and we don't call them defendants because everything is designed to make you think that these are not people. This is just like some like conveyor belt of items going by that you just have to figure out which box or which cage to put them in, you know, and these are people and they're individuals and everybody has a story. And, you know, any one of us could be in that situation. You don't know. It's good.
I strongly disagree with this idea that any one of us could be in this situation and that there's just sort of carried along like the current carries them along. They didn't do anything. The current just sort of carries them along. They're victims of circumstance. They're victims of the family that they grew up in. I'm just not buying it. But I do think that we are grooming our young people into that ideology, certainly. And so their solution, and I disagree that we don't see defendants or even convicted criminals as people. I think that idea is hammered home ad nauseum. Their humanity, their story. I mean, look at the coverage of any Innocence Project campaign. They'll have their baby pictures. The victim is totally obscured and forgotten. And I'm just bewildered that there's not even one celebrity out there that does any kind of victim advocacy work related to our criminal justice system as far as around crimes of murder. I've never seen that. And so I just wonder what's the value. There has to be some kind of virtue signaling value in doing this kind of work and not the work of, say, the National Organization of Victims of Juvenile Murderers or another victims' rights organization that doesn't deal with that doesn't deal with victims who are alive, like SA cases. You might see like some actress talk about her own experience in that area. That's what's interfering. So weird. Okay, am I back? All right. All right. So it just booted me out. Sorry about that, guys. Really apologize. Hopefully this just program just booted me out right in the middle of it. I think, I won't spend too much more time on this interview, but I did find it extremely interesting and very telling. So let me try one more time and hopefully it won't boot me out again. But if it does, I don't know. Maybe it's just not, maybe, maybe it's the shadowy underworld of our criminal justice system doing this to your loved one.
What might happen if this legislation to protect virtual access doesn't pass?
Well, what'll happen is that things will just keep on going on like they have been going on, and that's not acceptable. People need to get in on this. People need to know what's going on. And, if they took the Zoom access away, I can still call in from where I am, but the audio is really bad. Um, we just, I'm sorry, what question am I answering?
No, just like, well, what's
I
at
mean, I-
stake if the legislation doesn't pass? I mean, obviously for you, the only way you can participate is virtual access. So one consequence would be that you wouldn't be able to be a court watcher in Prince George's anymore.
Right.
They
I
gave
wouldn't
us
be able to-
audio. They gave us audio that, like Fiona was just saying, sucks.
They did. They gave us audio, but really, it's sort of like you're trying to write things down, and they're like, "And then he was born and he was 27 years old," and then when the
Then show up in person like I do. Get there, get to the courthouse and sit in the courtroom. I mean, that's crazy. You have 2 different ways to watch a bail hearing and that's not enough? Come on. All right. I think that I think we've done half of it, and, I just wanna tell you a little bit about some of the people behind this movement. So, first off, we saw Dr. Carmen Johnson, depending on when she is what interview she's doing and what she's referring to, who's referring to her. So, she was convicted let me see if I can actually share this. Hold on one second. She was convicted for crimes she did in 2015, I believe, or maybe she was convicted in 2015. Let's see. Judge Judge George Jared Hazel sentenced Carmen Johnson, age 48, of Gambrills, Maryland, late yesterday to 57 months in prison, followed by 5 years of supervised release, excuse me, for conspiracy, wire fraud, and making a false statement on a loan application arising from 2 residential mortgage fraud schemes. Judge Hazel also entered an order that Johnson pay $2.3 million in restitution. And her scheme involved many other co-conspirators. So according to the evidence presented at her 7-day trial, in the first scheme, which operated from March 2007, okay, my mistake, March 2007, she was convicted in 2015, March 2007 to November 2008, Johnson conspired with real estate agent Edgar Tipquire Ritter and others to fraudulently obtain residential mortgage loans by making false statements during the loan application and approval process. In the second scheme, witnesses testified that between April and July 2008, Johnson conspired with a real estate agent, Nisane Ligate, and others in a similar mortgage fraud scheme involving 2 properties in Baltimore, right? So that will give you an idea, and there's all these co-conspirators, and they're asked to pay crazy amounts of restitution, millions of dollars. And I will try to put that link up in the comment section after this live stream. And it's very interesting because to this day, she still maintains her her innocence and says in this article, she said that, okay, they say that eventually my story will be told. This was an article said convicted. She used to work for the NAACP as an executive. She's and then the headline is convicted NAACP exec Carmen Johnson was allegedly drugged and unable to defend her innocence. So that's interesting. Who's drugging her, right? And how could she not defend herself in court? And it says, when she's asked how she's holding up, Carmen Johnson responds, assuredly paying attention to the details in the journey. The former head of the Prince George's County NAACP branch's Housing Committee's journey took a new meaning this past February when she was convicted on charges of conspiracy, wire fraud, and making a false statement on a loan application arising from 2 residential mortgage fraud schemes. Quote, when people are in a situation like mine, they turn into sleepwalkers because you are told when to eat, when to go to bed, when to do this, when to do that. Determined to keep her head held high, Johnson is actually determined to keep her head high. Johnson, 48, is just a few months into serving a 57-month sentence in a federal prison, which will be followed by 5 years of supervised release. And she was ordered to pay $2.3 million in restitution to financial lending institutions for their losses on 10 foreclosed properties. Eventually, my story will be told, and I can't miss one detail of this whole journey, Johnson says, hopeful that she will be released soon and will be returned home to her family. Johnson claims her innocence because she puts it, quote, personally, I never did mortgages a day in my life. I'm an activist. I was helping. I mean, the jury disagreed or the judge disagreed. I'm not sure if she had a jury trial. I was helping people with foreclosures, quote. The owner of CJ Lendings and its predecessor, Able Estate and Company, which provided credit repair services, is adamant she did nothing wrong. Witnesses testified that in both schemes, Johnson reported to credit bureaus and provided her fellow co-conspirators with false credit histories showing backdated lines of credit that were used to convince lenders to give mortgage loans. Why did her co-defenders plead guilty? Quote, I don't know any of them. I know 2 are realtors at high-end real estate agencies. The only reason I can say they pled guilty is because they were absolutely guilty. So she's just the one. Everyone else actually did the crime, had nothing to do with our assembly line of injustice. And the courts got it right with her co-defendants, or co-conspirators, but with her, she's innocent. Johnson persists she's innocent of the charges. They ask her, what do you want your constituents to know about your case? Innocent people go to jail. And when she was asked why you weren't able to prove your innocence, I had fired 3 high-profile attorneys. Good for you that you were able to afford 3 high-profile attorneys. By the time I got to trial, I was heavily sedated on Klonopin, which is a medication the psychiatrist prescribed for me. I was ordered to go through therapy once a week. I did that for almost 18 months or so. I couldn't even function. So it was Klonopin's fault. And the other woman who you heard about, life after lockup, was, let me just show you really quickly, it was a case that made national news. Also stealing, this was mortgage fraud. This woman, Kiana Johnson, she was involved with flat out stealing property. So they were looking for homes that were, say the grass was a little long, looked like someone hadn't been in there. And Kiana Johnson moved in as a squatter and would live there in the home. And then the realtor that she was in on the scheme with would make her fake deeds to the home. So let me just, okay. Yeah, I think my share screen, I think it's all, I think this is, oh, nope. Is it decided to work now? Okay. Okay, here we go. So, whoop. Woman who made national headlines guilty of stealing a home. I won't read the whole thing, but Kiana Johnson, who made national headlines, and she made ABC News, did a whole two-part segment on it. Headlines for an alleged scheme to steal houses, was guilty of a second property theft. So she's running life after lockup, and she is the, I think, co-director of Court Watchers MP in that area in Maryland. So I will try to remember to link this as well. So that is the background. Those are the loved ones to the Court Watcher community. And obviously, they just got caught up in the justice system. It wasn't their fault, et cetera, et cetera. But that will give you an idea of, if you go, I actually, it's kind of I have no trouble with the idea, like, just to let you know, I have no trouble with people going to court, but just to go to court with that ideology instead of a more neutral ideology where you listen and learn on both sides and then come to a conclusion. But when you already come into court with a conclusion that everything you are witnessing is a massive, massive injustice, then that's what you're going to find and that's what you're going to see. And they have a whole list of cops that they pointed out. They keep a list of cops that have been involved in stop and frisk or what they consider illegal activity. And those become the court watchers' enemies, right? So I thought it was extremely interesting. I think I'm going to end it here before I get booted out again. But I will be back next time. Talk about I have really interesting stuff planned coming up. Can't wait to come back and talk about some really interesting cases. Stay tuned. Thank you so much for listening and being patient, and have a great rest of the day.